3.5 million. That is how many unauthorized bank and credit card accounts were created inside one of America's biggest banks to hit sales goals that sounded like victory bells but rang like alarms. Imagine, this was your money, your name, your credit score quietly used like a spare part. How does a brand turn into a pressure machine that pushed employees to sell you products you never asked for and then charged you for them? Regulators later called it widespread and illegal, and the bank paid billions. Yet it grew inside everyday branches on ordinary days. Would you have spotted the warning signs when a banker asked for just one more account to qualify for a bonus? The truth is simple and chilling, and it starts with one daily number. That is where we begin today. Wells Fargo built its modern identity on cross-selling. The pitch sounded harmless. If you like your checking account, you might also want a savings account, a credit card, or online bill pay. Decades of steady growth and a friendly Main Street image made that message persuasive. Then came a culture of extreme targets, measured in products per household, tracked every single day. Frontline workers were told to hit those marks or risk discipline and lost pay. Many tried to sell the right way. Many more felt cornered. Reports show that the pressure intensified through the early 2010s when senior leaders publicly celebrated rising cross-sell metrics that investors loved to hear. Behind the scenes, some employees moved money between accounts without consent, created fake PINs and fake emails, and opened cards that customers never requested. Fees followed. Credit scores sank. Customer trust cracked. In 2016, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and the City of Los Angeles announced a joint action. The bank paid civil penalties and promised reforms, and senior executives eventually resigned. But the deeper question remained. How did something so vast operate in plain view for so long? That is the trail we need to follow next. Here is how the engine worked, step by step. First came the quota. Employees faced daily targets tied to incentive pay. The number became the mission. Second came the playbook. If a customer already had one product, suggest a second and a third, then move to a fourth. If the customer hesitated, create a placeholder email that routed back to the branch or enroll them in online services so the metrics ticked upward. Third came the false funding. Some staff shifted small sums from a real account to seed a new one, then reversed the transfer to hide the movement. Fourth came the fees. Dormant accounts triggered charges, while surprise credit cards added annual costs and interest. Fifth came silence. Many customers did not notice for months, and when they did, the maze of call centers and branch visits wore them down. Sixth came the scoreboard. Senior leaders touted a rising average of products per household, a number that thrilled markets. That headline metric, the one investors heard in every earnings call, rewarded volume, not consent. Meanwhile, whistleblowers who raised concerns described retaliation or dismissal. Compliance reviews often measured policy boxes, but they did not stop the sales heat. The pressure created a perverse loop where workers, fearing missed goals, cut corners to survive another day. The loop kept spinning because it delivered the figures the street wanted. And the longer it spun, the harder it was to admit the machine was broken. That tension would finally snap. And when it did, the ripples reached Washington and Wall Street at the same time. But before the snap, the pressure climbed one more turn. The unraveling began when local lawsuits and media reports drew national attention, and regulators compared notes. In late summer of 2016, federal agencies announced that the bank would pay penalties and refund customers for unauthorized accounts. The scandal forced a reckoning in the boardroom. The chief executive stepped down after congressional hearings, where lawmakers grilled leadership on sales culture, whistleblower retaliation, and compensation clawbacks. In early 2018, the Federal Reserve took an extraordinary step. It capped the bank's total assets until risk controls and governance improved, a public signal that growth would not continue until the culture changed. Later, the Department of Justice announced a deferred prosecution agreement. The company admitted misconduct in misleading customers, agreed to a multi-billion-dollar payment, and accepted compliance duties under federal oversight. The Securities and Exchange Commission also announced a settlement for misleading investors about the success of the cross-selling strategy. Over time, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency brought cases against former executives, imposing fines and industry bans. one former retail leader later agreed to resolve fraud charges with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Each step revealed how a single performance metric can warp behavior from the branch lobby to the investor call. The turning point was clear. The story had moved from branch paperwork to courtroom transcripts, and the numbers that once thrilled markets now read like a confession. The costs were sweeping. Customers faced unwanted fees, damaged credit, and hours spent fighting to unwind false accounts. Workers who refused to cheat lost pay or jobs, while others who bent rules lost careers when the scandal broke. Investors watched the share price swing, and long-term trust evaporated. The company paid a series of penalties and customer remediation worth several billions of dollars, including a very large law enforcement action in late 2022 covering deposit accounts, auto lending, and mortgage servicing. Years after the first fines, the bank was still under consent orders that demanded risk and culture reform. The Federal Reserve's asset cap locked growth until independent reviews validated changes. Political pressure stayed high, and hearings kept the story alive. Slowly, as controls improved, regulators began to close orders. In 2025, news outlets reported that key restrictions were lifted after reforms and independent assessments. That milestone did not erase the harm, but it marked a line between what the bank had been and what it said it wanted to become. For customers, the lesson was personal. Your savings could have vanished in fees you never agreed to pay. For workers, the lesson cut both ways. Incentives can reward care, or they can reward speed without consent. For leaders, the message was unmistakable. Culture is not a slogan. It is a system of targets, checks, and consequences. So what should you take away when the next friendly banker offers one more product? First, slow the pace. Say you will decide tomorrow, and then read every disclosure at home. Second, watch for consent traps. Never accept a new card or account unless you sign a clear document and receive a confirmation that matches your words. Third, check your reports. Pull your credit file at least once each year and review bank statements every month for surprise fees and odd transfers. Fourth, understand incentives. Ask how your banker is paid and whether bonuses depend on the number of products you hold. Fifth, know the referees. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency Handle Bank, Consumer Issues, and the Securities and Exchange Commission polices investor disclosures. If something looks wrong, file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and keep records of dates, names, and amounts. Finally, share what you learn. Thousands like you missed the early signals because the system looked routine. When you spread real warnings, you help others protect their money before the pressure machine starts again. If you want to see more financial scandals exposed, subscribe to Money Mystery. Share this video to warn more people. Which scandal should I investigate next?